The crystal shattered against the marble floor, and 12 species fell silent. Ambassador Ural stood at the center of the Galactic Council chamber, her translucent skin flickering with colors that no translator could interpret. She had dropped her ceremonial communication crystal on purpose. It was the Salathi way of demanding attention when words failed. "Our sun is dying," she said. Her voice carried across the vast circular room where representatives of the galaxy's oldest civilizations sat in elevated pods. "We have 18 months. Perhaps less." Counselor Dravik, a massive reptilian with 4 arms and scales like polished obsidian, leaned forward in his seat. His species, the hegemony, had ruled this sector for 10,000 years. "We received your scientific reports, Ambassador. The situation is tragic. But what would you have us do?" "Help us evacuate," Ural pleaded. 7 billion of my people will die if we cannot leave Crystallis." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Salathi were known throughout the galaxy as artists, philosophers, and scientists of delicate instruments. They had given the universe its most beautiful music and its most precise medical scanners. But they had never built warships or heavy transports. They had never needed to. "The radiation around your dying star would destroy our vessels," said another counselor, a being of living gas contained in a magnetic sphere. "Our shields cannot withstand such exposure. Our ships would melt before reaching your atmosphere," added a third voice that Ural's skin dimmed to a shade of deep purple. "Despair. Then you condemn us to extinction." "We condemn you to nothing," Dravik said, not unkindly. "The universe condemns you. This is an unfortunate inevitability. Your species will be remembered with honor." "Remembered?" Ural's voice cracked. "My children will be remembered." How comforting. From the observation gallery, where younger species were permitted to watch but not speak, a human woman rose to her feet. She wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, and her dark skin gleamed under the chamber's artificial lights. "Permission to address the council," she called out. Dravik's eyes narrowed. "You are Captain Okonkwo of the human delegation, yes? Your species has been a council member for only 3 years. You have no standing to speak in emergency sessions. I'm aware of the protocols, Counselor. I'm asking you to make an exception." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I have a solution." The chamber erupted. Species that had been spacefaring for millennia turned to stare at the human. Her people had achieved faster-than-light travel barely a century ago. They were infants by galactic standards, still learning to walk among the stars. Dravik raised one of his 4 hands for silence. "Very well, Captain. Amuse us." Okonkwo walked down from the gallery, her boots echoing in the sudden quiet. She stopped beside Ural and looked up at the assembled counselors without fear. "Earth will lead the evacuation of Crystallis," she said. Dravik laughed. It was a harsh sound, like stones grinding together. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious. Your ships are primitive. Your shielding technology is a century behind ours. You would burn before reaching Salathi orbit." Okonkwo smiled, and something in that smile made Dravik stop laughing. "Counselor, do you know what Earth is like?" "I have read reports. A moderate planet. Liquid water. Oxygen atmosphere. Those reports are incomplete." Okonkwo clasped her hands behind her back. "Earth has temperature swings of over 100 degrees. Our planet is covered in active volcanoes, massive storms, and tectonic plates that shake our cities to rubble. Our star bombards us with radiation. Our atmosphere was once poison. Our oceans are filled with predators. 70% of our surface will kill an unprotected human within minutes." She paused, letting her words sink in. "My species evolved on a death world, Counselor. We survived ice ages that froze half our planet. We survived asteroid impacts that darkened our skies for years. We survived plagues that killed half our population, wars that killed millions more, and disasters that would have ended any other species." Ural stared at the human with something new in her prismatic eyes. "Hope. We didn't just survive," Okonkwo continued. "We built machines to protect us from our own world. Radiation shielding, extreme temperature suits, atmospheric processors. We had to, or we would have died. And we developed something else along the way." "What is that?" Dravik asked, his mockery fading. "Stubbornness." Okonkwo turned to face Ural directly. "Ambassador, humanity will evacuate your people. We will fly into your dying sun's radiation, and we will carry your children to safety. I cannot promise we will save everyone, but I can promise we will not stop until the job is done or we are dead." The chamber fell absolutely silent. "What?" Ural whispered. "Why would you risk your people for strangers?" Okonkwo placed a hand on the ambassador's shoulder, gentle despite the Salathi's fragile crystalline structure. "Because you asked for help. That's reason enough." Dravik shook his massive head. "You will burn, human. Your ships will become tombs. This is suicide dressed as heroism." Captain Nadia Okonkwo looked up at the ancient counselor, and her smile returned. It was not a gentle smile. It was the smile of a species that had crawled out of the mud, survived everything the universe threw at them, and kept going anyway. "Counselor," she said, "burning is something humans understand very well. We emerged through fire once before. We can do it again." She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving 12 species staring after her in stunned silence. Behind her, Ural allowed herself to feel something she had abandoned days ago: hope. The rain fell sideways, driven by winds that screamed across the landing platform at nearly 100 kilometers per hour. Ural stood frozen at the transport's doorway, watching humans walk through the storm as if it were nothing. Water struck their skin and rolled off. Lightning split the sky above them, and they did not even flinch. One woman actually laughed, tilting her face upward to catch the drops on her tongue. "Ambassador." A human officer appeared beside her, holding a piece of fabric over his head. "We have a vehicle waiting. The Admiral is eager to meet you." "That water," Ural said softly. "It would dissolve my skin in seconds." The officer paused. "Right. Sorry, we forget sometimes. Here." He pulled a protective suit from his bag. "This will keep you safe." She put on the suit with trembling hands. On Crystallis, water existed only in carefully controlled environments. Rain was something from alien documentaries, a curiosity from primitive worlds. She had never imagined walking through it. The vehicle took them to a massive building in the heart of Geneva. Inside, Ural finally allowed herself to breathe. The air was filtered, the temperature controlled. Almost civilized, Admiral Kwame Asani met her in a conference room filled with holographic displays. He was an older human with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. When he shook her hand, his grip was firm but careful. "Ambassador Ural, welcome to Earth. I apologize for the weather. Do you have storms like this often?" "This." Asante glanced at the window, where rain still lashed the glass. "This is mild. You should see hurricane season." Ural did not know what a hurricane was. She decided she did not want to know. "Your United Assembly," she said. "Have they agreed to help us?" Asante's expression tightened. There was debate. Many argued we cannot afford the resources. Our own colonies need supplies, ships, personnel. Ural's hope began to crack. "I understand. Perhaps we asked too much." "You misunderstand." Asante smiled slightly. The debate lasted 6 hours. In the end, the vote was unanimous. "Earth will save your people, Ambassador. Whatever it takes." He led her to a window that overlooked the city. Towers of glass and steel rose against the stormy sky. Vehicles flew between them in organized streams. Millions of humans lived and worked below, going about their daily lives. "Your world is so violent," Ural said. "How did your species survive long enough to build all this?" "We adapted. We fought. We refused to die." Asante pointed at a distant mountain range, barely visible through the clouds. Those mountains were formed by tectonic plates crashing together. The same forces cause earthquakes that flatten cities. We learned to build structures that bend instead of break. He pointed upward. Our sun throws radiation at us constantly. We developed ways to block it, filter it, use it. When our atmosphere was damaged, we repaired it. When our climate changed, we changed with it. A child ran past the window, chasing another through the rain. They were laughing, splashing through puddles that would have been lethal to Salathi young. "Your children," Ural whispered. "They play in poison. That's not poison to them. It's just water." Asante watched the children with something soft in his old soldier's eyes. "Ambassador, we evolved on this world. Every part of us is built to survive it. Thick skin, adaptive immune systems, bodies that repair radiation damage, metabolisms that can handle extreme temperatures. We are deathworlders. And we have spent our entire existence building technology to extend that survival to hostile environments." Over the following days, Ural visited the Olympus shipyards orbiting Mars. She watched humans work in conditions that would have killed her species in minutes. They welded metal in hard vacuum, ran diagnostics while floating in microgravity, and made jokes about the cold that would have frozen Salathi blood solid. 12 massive carriers were being retrofitted with enhanced radiation shields. The chief engineer, a woman named Ingrid Halvorsen, explained the modifications with obvious pride. Standard solar flare protection, scaled up by a factor of 20. We developed this tech because our own sun tries to kill us regularly. Your dying star is worse, but it's the same principle. Block the radiation, filter what gets through, repair the damage fast enough to stay alive. And your crews? Ural asked. Will they survive? Halvorsen shrugged. They'll get sick. Some might die. But humans can absorb more radiation than any species in the Council. We've been doing it since we crawled out of caves and sat too close to fires. The night before the fleet launched, Ural stood in the shipyard observation deck. A young worker approached her, still wearing his welding gear. His name tag read Pavel. You're the Salathi ambassador, right? He asked. Yes. We're going to save your people. He said it simply, like he was stating that water was wet. What? Ural had asked this question 100 times. She still did not understand the answer. You do not know us. You gain nothing from this. Your people will die. Pavel scratched his chin, thinking, my grandmother survived a war when she was young. Strangers carried her to safety. She never knew their names. She told me that story every year until she died. He smiled, warm and genuine. You asked for help. We help. That's what humans do. The fleet launched at dawn. 12 carriers, 40 support vessels, and 15,000 human volunteers who knew they might not come back. Ural watched from the observation deck as the ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, heading toward her dying world. Then her communication device buzzed with an urgent message from home. The sun's decay had accelerated. They now had 11 months. The fire was spreading faster than anyone predicted. The first thing the Council observers noticed was the screaming of their radiation alarms. 3 hours into the Crystal Lease system. Every non-human on the fleet was already sick. The Galactic Council had sent representatives from 5 species to document the evacuation. By the time the human ships reached orbit, 2 of those representatives were in medical bays, and 1 was dead. Dr. Samuel Obi, chief medical officer aboard the flagship, worked without rest. His patients were aliens with biology he barely understood, suffering from radiation exposure that would have been moderate for humans. How are our people handling it? Captain Okonkwo asked during a brief visit to the medical bay. Mild symptoms. Headaches, fatigue, some nausea. Obi checked his instruments for the 100th time. Nothing we can't manage. And them? Obi looked at the alien patients, their bodies wrapped in protective blankets, their vital signs fluctuating dangerously. They're dying, Captain. This level of radiation is killing them in hours. We're barely keeping them stable. Okonkwo nodded grimly. Do what you can. I need to coordinate the evacuation. On the planet's surface, conditions were worse than any projection had predicted. 2 of the main population domes had already cracked. Radiation poured through the breaches, and thousands of Salathi had died in the first wave. The human transport ships descended through an atmosphere that glowed with deadly light. Inside their cockpits, pilots watched their instruments spike into danger zones and kept flying anyway. They had trained for this. They had been born for this. Sergeant Rosa Delgado was first on the ground with her Marine squad. She stepped out of the transport into a landscape of crystalline spires and shimmering plains, all of it bathed in the orange-red glow of a dying sun. Her radiation counter clicked steadily. Elevated, but manageable. Spread out, she ordered. Find survivors. Prioritize children and medical cases. The Salathi evacuation centers were overwhelmed. Millions of crystalline beings crowded into facilities designed for thousands. They looked up at the human Marines with something between terror and desperate hope. What are those creatures? A Salathi elder asked, watching Delgado's squad move through the crowd. Humans, answered a younger Salathi. The deathworlders. They came to save us. Delgado reached the elder and knelt down to meet their eyes. The Salathi was ancient, their crystalline skin clouded and cracked with age. Can you walk? She asked. I can barely stand, young one. Leave me. Save the children. We're saving everyone. Delgado lifted the elder in her arms like they weighed nothing. To a human, they almost did. Salathi were fragile, delicate, built for a gentle world. Let's get you to the transport. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Human Marines carried Salathi young in their arms, shielding the children's sensitive bodies with their own. Human engineers worked to seal breached domes, buying time for more evacuations. Human medics treated radiation sickness with drugs and techniques developed over generations of surviving their own hostile star. Ural arrived with the second wave of transports. She had insisted on returning to her world, despite the danger. She had family here. She had responsibilities. Her childhood home was in the northern settlement, near the Temple of Resonance. As her transport descended, she saw that the temple's great crystal spire had shattered. Fragments lay scattered across the plaza where she had played as a child. She found her parent, Sorrel, in a crowded shelter. The old Salathi was weak, their light fading. Crystalline decay syndrome, accelerated by radiation exposure. You should not have come back, Sorrel said. I had to. These humans. Sorrel's prismatic eyes watched a Marine carry 3 Salathi children past their shelter. They walk through fire like it is nothing. They were born in fire, Ural said. Their world is violence and poison and death. And somehow, they became this. They became people who fly across the galaxy to save strangers. Above them, the sky flashed white. Solar flare. The human fleet moved without hesitation. Carriers repositioned themselves between the planet and the incoming wave of radiation. They used their hulls as shields, absorbing the worst of the blast to protect the evacuation transports below Point 2. Council observation vessels, hovering at what their crews thought was a safe distance, were caught in the flare's edge. They exploded instantly. Counselor Dravik, watching from his flagship even further away, felt something cold settle in his chest. He had mocked the humans. He had called them primitive, foolish, suicidal. Now he watched them take a solar flare on their hulls and keep working. His communication officer approached. Counselor, we're receiving requests from across the galaxy. Everyone wants to see what's happening here. Broadcast it, Dravik ordered. Let them see everything. On the surface, Sergeant Delgado pulled her squad back to the transports. They were all sick now, radiation burns forming on exposed skin, but none of them stopped. None of them complained that a Salathi child grabbed Delgado's hand as they boarded. Are you dying? The child asked. Delgado looked at her blistered skin, felt the ache deep in her bones. Maybe a little, she admitted. Then why do you keep helping? Delgado smiled, and even through the pain, it was genuine. Because you need us. And we don't leave people behind. The transport lifted off as another flare warning screamed across all channels. Captain Okonkwo's voice cut through the static. All hands, brace for impact. Maintain evacuation positions. Those people are getting off that planet. The sky turned white again. The humans held their ground. The list of dead grew longer every hour. Captain Okonkwo stood in the flagship's command center, watching names scroll across her screen. 217 humans had died in the last solar event alone. 4 ships were crippled beyond repair. Their crews evacuated to functional vessels that were already overcrowded. Any other fleet would have retreated. Any other species would have calculated the losses, decided the cost was too high, and gone home. Okonkwo ordered the damaged ships stripped for parts. We can use the radiation shielding from the Endeavor to reinforce the horizon, Chief Engineer Tanaka reported. The life support from the Valiant is still functional. We can transplant it to the rescue transports. Do it. Redistribute the surviving crews. No one goes home until the job is done. On the surface, the evacuation continued. Millions of Salathi were already aboard human vessels, but millions more remained. Remote settlements, stubborn families who refused to leave their homes, communities too far from the main evacuation points to reach easily. Sergeant Delgado led her squad through the ruins of a collapsed dome. Radiation counters screamed. Her skin was covered in burns that would take weeks to heal. If she survived that long, a Marine named Torres grabbed her arm. Sergeant, there's a structure ahead. Looks like a nursery. It's collapsed, but our sensors show life signs inside. How many? Over 300. All children. Delgado did not hesitate. Move. The nursery had been beautiful once. Crystal walls that sang when wind passed through them. Floors that captured and reflected light in patterns meant to soothe young minds. Now it was rubble, tons of crystalline debris trapping 300 Salathi children in a pocket of failing life support. "We can't move this with equipment," Torres said. "It'll take hours to get machinery here. Then we move it by hand." They started digging. Humans lifting crystal blocks that weighed hundreds of kilograms, passing them back in chains, crawling into gaps that threatened to collapse at any moment. Their suits tore. Their skin blistered. One Marine, a young woman named Kowalski, got her arm crushed when a wall shifted. She kept digging with her other hand. 3 hours later, they broke through. The children were huddled in a corner, singing a soft song that Delgado's translator could not fully interpret. Something about light and hope and waiting for rescue. "We're here," Delgado said, her voice rough with exhaustion and radiation sickness. "We're getting you out." She carried them one by one. Her squad carried them. When they ran out of arms, they went back for more. By the time the last child was loaded onto the transport, every human in Delgado's squad was bleeding from somewhere. None of them complained. None of them stopped. In orbit, Counselor Dravik watched the footage. He had been broadcasting everything to the galaxy, as promised. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds were seeing what humans did when someone asked for help. He opened a private channel to Captain Okonkwo. "Captain, may I ask you something?" Okonkwo looked exhausted. Burns marked her face. Her eyes were red from radiation exposure. "Make it quick, Counselor. I have an evacuation to run." "Why?" "I understand duty. I understand obligation. But this is beyond anything in my experience. Your people are dying, and you keep sending more. You keep volunteering for the worst assignments. You keep giving your food and water to refugees." "What?" Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was soft but steady. "On Earth, we have people called firefighters. When buildings burn, they run inside to save strangers. They know they might die. They go anyway. We have soldiers who throw themselves on explosives to protect their friends. We have doctors who treat plague victims knowing they'll probably catch the disease themselves. We have ordinary people who donate parts of their own bodies to save people they've never met." She paused, and something like pride flickered in her tired eyes. "Counselor, humans have been saving each other since before we had language. It's not strategy. It's not calculation. It's who we are. We emerged through fire, and we learned that the only way to survive fire is together." Dravik had no response. He simply watched as another human transport descended into the dying light, and another. On the surface, Ural finally convinced her parent to leave. Sorrel had refused for days, insisting they were too old, too weak, too attached to a world that was ending. A human engineer changed their mind. The life support system on their transport failed mid-loading. Everyone inside would have died in minutes. The engineer, a quiet man named Rashid, went in to fix it. He worked for 20 minutes in conditions that were slowly killing him. When the system was repaired, he collapsed at his station. He died with his tools in his hands and a smile on his face. His last words were instructions to his colleague on how to finish the calibration. Sorrel watched them carry his body out. "He did not know us," they said softly. "He died for strangers." "Yes," Ural replied. "That is what humans do." Sorrel rose on unsteady legs. "Then we will not waste his gift. Take me to the transport." 60% of the Salathi were evacuated when the sun entered its final collapse phase. Radiation levels tripled overnight. The remaining Salathi sent messages begging the humans to save themselves. Captain Okonkwo's response was simple. "We're not done yet. Launch the next wave." The fire was consuming everything. The humans refused to leave. 17 civilian ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and the human fleet cheered. Reinforcements had arrived from Earth. Not military vessels with trained crews, but cargo haulers, passenger liners, even a museum ship that had been restored to functionality by volunteer engineers. Thousands of humans with no combat training, no experience in disaster zones, and no obligation to be here. They had come anyway. Pavel stepped off one of the civilian transports with a grin on his weathered face. He had been a dock worker at the Olympus shipyards, one of the people who built the original evacuation fleet. Now he wore a basic radiation suit and carried a toolkit that a medical officer intercepted him immediately. "Sir, this is an active evacuation zone. Radiation levels are critical. You need to return to a safe distance." "I helped build these ships," Pavel said simply. "I should help fly them." He was not alone. Teachers and factory workers, artists and accountants, retired soldiers, and young students. They had watched the broadcast from Counselor Dravik's ship. They had seen humans dying to save aliens they had never met. And they had decided that if their people were going to do something impossible, they wanted to help. Admiral Asani coordinated from Earth, redirecting every available ship. Send everything we have. Strip the Mars defense grid if you have to. Those people are not dying on my watch. On the surface, Ural organized Salathi volunteers. Her people had spent days as passive victims, waiting to be saved. She refused to let that continue. The humans have shown us what survival means, she told a crowd of able-bodied Salathi. It means choosing to fight even when the odds are against you. It means helping others when you barely have the strength to help yourself. We will not simply wait for rescue. We will earn it. Salathi volunteers joined human logistics teams. They were weaker, more fragile, easily hurt by conditions humans barely noticed. But they knew their world. They knew where the hidden settlements were, which tunnels were safe, which leaders would refuse to evacuate, and which ones could be convinced that a Salathi engineer named Carries worked alongside Chief Tanaka to modify rescue transports for greater capacity. Your technology is so robust, Carries marveled. Our ships would have failed days ago. Our technology evolved the same way we did, Tanaka replied. Built to survive punishment. Built to keep working when everything goes wrong. The evacuation entered its final phase. Remote settlements, isolated communities, families who had chosen to die with their world. Human teams went to each one, carrying messages and making promises. Some refused. An old priest at the Temple of Resonance insisted on staying with his sacred crystals, artifacts that had been in his family for generations. He would rather die than abandon them. Sergeant Delgado listened to his refusal, then started picking up the crystals. What are you doing? The priest demanded. Taking these to your transport. She handed a crystal to Torres. Careful. I think this one's fragile. You cannot carry all of them. There are thousands. Delgado smiled, and even through her radiation burns, it was warm. Then we'd better get started. Her squad spent 6 hours carrying sacred artifacts through radiation storms. By the end, they could barely walk. The priest followed them to the transport in stunned silence, clutching his most precious crystal to his chest. Why? He asked, the same question every Salathi eventually asked. Because they matter to you, Delgado said. And you matter to us. The sun expanded visibly now, a massive red presence that filled the sky. Temperatures spiked. Radiation alarms never stopped screaming. The remaining Salathi population huddled in the last functional shelters, waiting for transports that were already overwhelmed. Captain Okonkwo made a decision. Remove all safety limits. Maximum capacity on every ship. Humans give up quarters, food, water. We can survive longer without comfort than they can without rescue. Human crews doubled up, then tripled up. They slept in shifts in corridors. They shared ration packs designed for one person between 3. They gave their water to Salathi children who were dehydrating in the heat that a human pilot named Chen flew 18 evacuation runs in a single day. On her 19th run, her transport's engine failed. She crash-landed in a radiation zone. Cargo bay full of Salathi families. She stayed with them for 3 hours, keeping them calm, keeping them alive, until another transport could reach them. When rescuers finally arrived, Chen could not walk. She had to be carried out. Her first words were, "Did everyone make it?" The last transport lifted off carrying 847 Salathi, including the priest and his sacred crystals. As it rose through the atmosphere, the planet's surface began to crack. Magma burst through fissures. Crystalline structures that had stood for thousands of years shattered and fell in orbit. The fleet made the jump to faster-than-light travel. Behind them, the sun consumed everything. Crystallis, the Salathi homeworld, ceased to exist. Ural watched from a viewport as her world died. She had been born there. She had grown up there. Everything she had known was burning. Then she felt a small hand take hers. She looked down. A human child, maybe 7 years old, was standing beside her. The child was sharing their meal ration, a small bar of compressed nutrients, with a Salathi orphan sitting nearby. "Are you sad?" the human child asked. "Yes," Ural admitted. "Very sad. My mom says it's okay to be sad. But it's also okay to be happy that we're still here." Ural looked at the 2 children, human and Salathi, sharing food in the viewport's light. Around them, survivors of both species filled every space on the ship. They had lost everything. They had also gained something. For the first time in weeks, Ural allowed herself to hope. The fire had taken their world, but it had not taken their future. 6 months later, the Galactic Council chamber was completely silent. Ambassador Ural stood where she had stood before, in the center of the vast circular room. But everything had changed. She was no longer pleading. She was no longer desperate. She was speaking as the voice of a people who had survived the impossible. Counselor Dravik rose first. "Before we begin formal proceedings," he said, "I must address this assembly." He turned his massive reptilian body toward the human delegation. "I mocked you. I called your mission suicide. I said you would burn." He lowered his head, a gesture of submission that his species almost never made. "I was wrong, and I am sorry." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. A senior counselor apologizing to a junior species was almost unheard of. "I have spent 6 months reviewing the footage from Crystal Lease," Dravik continued. "I watched humans shield alien children with their bodies. I watched them give food to strangers while they themselves went hungry. I watched them die with smiles on their faces because they knew they had saved one more life." He activated a holographic display. Images filled the chamber. Sergeant Delgado carrying Salathi children through radiation storms. The engineer Rashid collapsing at his station after saving an entire transport. Pavel the dock worker working alongside soldiers half his age. Captain Okonkwo refusing to leave until the last transport was away. "We asked who would save the Salathi," Dravik said. "The humans did not ask if they could. They did not ask what they would gain. They asked only how soon they could begin." He sat down, and Ural took over. "When I first visited Earth," she said, "I was horrified. Their planet is violent beyond anything I had imagined. Storms that destroy cities. Predators in every ecosystem. Temperature swings that would kill most species. Their own star tries to poison them every day." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I asked them how they survived. They told me they adapted. They told me they built machines to protect themselves. But that was only part of the answer." She looked directly at Captain Okonkwo, who sat in the human section with visible radiation scars on her face and hands. "The real answer is that they survived together. They evolved not just bodies that endure, but hearts that refuse to abandon others. They emerged through fire, and instead of becoming hard and cruel, they became the species that runs toward danger to save strangers." Ural's crystalline skin flickered with colors of gratitude and love. 6 billion Salathi are alive today because of humanity. We lost our world, but we did not lose our people. We did not lose our future. She announced that the Salathi had accepted humanity's offer of a new homeworld, a planet called Kepler-7, which humans had partially terraformed after their own near-extinction event centuries ago. The Salathi would rebuild there, in a system protected by human patrols. The council voted on humanity's new status. When the results were announced, even Okonkwo looked surprised. Unanimous. Full senior member status. The fastest ascension in galactic history. After the session, Dravik approached Okonkwo privately. The massive reptilian seemed almost nervous. "Captain, I have a request. A personal one. I'm listening. My people are facing a crisis. Our birth rates have been declining for centuries. We have tried everything we know. We are too proud to admit weakness, but we are dying slowly, and we do not know how to stop it." Okonkwo studied him for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I watched your people sacrifice everything for strangers. Because I saw what humans do when someone asks for help." Dravik's voice dropped. "I am asking for help, Captain. Can you save us too?" Okonkwo reached out and took his clawed hand in hers. Her grip was warm and firm. "Show us what's wrong," she said. "We'll figure it out together." 1 year later, the new Salathi homeworld had a name. Refuge, and a memorial stood at its heart, in the center of the first city the Salathi built after their rescue. Crystal spires rose toward the sky, each one inscribed with names of those who had died on Crystal Lease. Around the memorial, human oak trees grew in perfect circles, planted by evacuation survivors as a symbol of the bond between species. Ural brought her daughter to see it on the child's first birthday. The little one was the first Salathi born on Refuge, a symbol of everything they had lost and everything they had gained. "This is where we remember," Ural told her daughter. This is where we honor the humans who saved us. Below the memorial plaza, children played in gardens filled with both Salathi crystal flowers and earth roses. Human and Salathi young ones chased each other through the paths, laughing in languages that were slowly blending together. A human boy fell and scraped his knee. A Salathi girl helped him up, her crystalline hands gentle on his skin. Ural watched them and felt her heart swell with emotion she could not name. The sun rose over refuge, light breaking through clouds and scattering across the crystal spires. It was not the sun she had grown up under. It was not the light of her ancestors. But it was warm. It was safe. It was hope made visible. Sorrel, her parent, appeared beside her. The old Salathi had recovered remarkably well on refuge. The clean air and gentle climate suited them. What will you tell her? Sorrel asked, gesturing at Ural's daughter. When she is old enough to understand? Ural smiled, and her skin shimmered with colors of joy and peace. I will tell her about the day our world ended. I will tell her about the species that came from a violent, poisonous planet and flew into a dying sun to save 7 billion strangers. I will tell her about the humans who gave everything they had because we asked for help. She lifted her daughter and turned to face the sunrise. And I will tell her what the galaxy learned that day. That fire does not only destroy. Sometimes, when wielded by the right hands, it forges something stronger. Below them, human and Salathi children laughed together in the morning light. From the ashes, a new future was growing. And it was beautiful.